The morning sun cast golden rays across Westminster Abbey as thousands of people lined the streets of London. Catherine Middleton stood before the ornate mirror in her private chamber at Buckingham Palace, her heart racing with nervous excitement. Today was the day she had dreamed of since childhood, yet never truly believed would come to pass. In just a few hours, she would walk down the same aisle where Princess Diana had once glided, where Queen Elizabeth had taken her vows, and where centuries of British royalty had made history. Her wedding dress hung gracefully nearby, a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace that had taken months to perfect. Sarah Burton and her team at Alexander McQueen had worked tirelessly to create something that would honor tradition while capturing Catherine's personal style. The dress featured intricate handmade lace applique, with rose, thistle, daffodil, and shamrock designs representing the four nations of the United Kingdom. Every stitch told a story, every detail held meaning that would be analyzed and admired for generations to come. Meanwhile, Prince William paced nervously in his apartments, adjusting his ceremonial red tunic for the 100th time. His brother Harry knocked gently on the door before entering, carrying 2 cups of tea and wearing a knowing smile. "Still can't believe this is happening, can you?" Harry asked, settling into a chair beside his elder brother. William shook his head, running his fingers through his hair one last time before putting on his military cap. The brothers had shared everything throughout their lives, their mother's love, the pain of her loss, the weight of royal duty, and now this moment of pure joy. William thought back to that day at St. Andrews University, when he first noticed the girl in the sheer dress at the charity fashion show. Catherine Middleton had been just another student then, someone he could laugh with, study alongside, and eventually fall deeply in love with, without the constant pressure of royal protocol. Outside the palace walls, the city of London had transformed into a living celebration. Street vendors sold commemorative mugs and flags, while families from across the Commonwealth had traveled thousands of miles to witness this historic moment. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, waving tiny Union Jack flags and wearing plastic tiaras. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, as if the entire nation was holding its breath before exhaling in collective joy. Television crews from around the world had positioned themselves at strategic points along the processional route, their cameras ready to capture every moment of what would become one of the most watched events in television history. From Australia to Canada, from New Zealand to Jamaica, millions of people were preparing to wake up early or stay up late to witness the fairy tale unfold in real time. Back in her chamber, Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, helped adjust the final details of her daughter's appearance. The Middleton family had come so far from their humble beginnings, building a successful party supply business and providing their children with the best education possible. Never in their wildest dreams had they imagined their eldest daughter would one day become a princess. Yet here they were, preparing for the most important day of their lives. Catherine's sister Pippa was radiant in her own right, wearing a stunning white dress that would later become almost as famous as the bride's gown. As the maid of honor, Pippa felt the weight of responsibility to ensure everything went perfectly for her beloved sister. The two had always been incredibly close, supporting each other through every challenge and celebrating every triumph together. The final preparations were underway throughout the Abbey, where florists had spent days creating breathtaking arrangements of seasonal British flowers. White roses, lily of the valley, and sweet William filled the ancient space with their delicate fragrance, while the morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the stone floor where so much history had unfolded. Archbishop Rowan Williams reviewed his notes one final time, understanding the magnitude of the ceremony he was about to perform. This was not just a wedding, but a moment that would define the future of the British monarchy. The young woman about to walk down that aisle would one day be queen consort, and the vows they exchanged would echo through history. As the clock ticked closer to 11 o'clock, the final guests began taking their seats in the Abbey. Prime ministers and presidents, celebrities and charity workers, childhood friends and distant relatives all gathered under the soaring Gothic arches. David and Victoria Beckham whispered quietly in their seats, while Sir Elton John, who had performed at Diana's funeral, prepared to witness this moment of new beginnings and hope for the royal family. The rumble of carriage wheels on cobblestones echoed through the London streets as Catherine's procession, began its journey from the Goring Hotel to Westminster Abbey. She had chosen to spend her final night as a commoner at the boutique hotel, a decision that spoke to her desire to maintain some connection to her former life, even as she prepared to enter the royal fold forever. Seated beside her father Michael in the elegant Rolls-Royce Phantom 6, Catherine gazed out at the sea of faces lining the route. Thousands upon thousands of well-wishers had camped out overnight, some traveling from as far as Scotland and Wales to secure the best viewing spots. Their cheers were deafening, a wave of sound that followed the car as it made its way through the historic streets of Westminster. Michael Middleton, dressed impeccably in his morning coat, squeezed his daughter's hand gently. As a former flight dispatcher who had built his family's fortune through hard work and determination, he had never imagined he would one day be escorting his daughter to marry the future King of England. His eyes misted slightly as he looked at Catherine, remembering the little girl who used to dress up as a princess in their family home in Berkshire, never knowing that her childhood games would one day become reality. The world watched in amazement as Catherine stepped out of the car at Westminster Abbey. The ivory silk satin dress flowed behind her like liquid moonlight, its 9-foot train carefully arranged by her sister Pippa and the young bridesmaids. The handmade lace veil, held in place by the Cartier halo tiara borrowed from Queen Elizabeth II, framed her face perfectly. The tiara, made in 1936 and featuring 739 brilliant diamonds and 149 baguette diamonds, had been a favorite of the Queen Mother and carried with it nearly a century of royal history. Inside the Abbey, Prince William waited at the altar with barely contained emotion. When the great doors opened and the first notes of the processional hymn filled the sacred space, his face lit up with a smile that would be remembered forever. As Catherine began her walk down the aisle, William whispered to his brother Harry, "She looks beautiful," his voice thick with emotion and wonder. The congregation rose as one, 2,000 guests bearing witness to a moment that bridged centuries of tradition with modern love. Queen Elizabeth II, resplendent in primrose yellow, watched with evident pride and satisfaction as her grandson prepared to take this monumental step. Beside her, Prince Philip maintained his characteristic stoic demeanor, though those who knew him well could see the warmth in his eyes. Catherine's walk down the aisle seemed to last an eternity, and yet pass in the blink of an eye. Each step carried her further from her old life and closer to a destiny that would reshape not only her own future, but the future of the monarchy itself. Her bouquet, a delicate arrangement of lily of the valley, sweet William and hyacinth, trembled slightly in her hands, the only outward sign of the nerves she must have been feeling. The music soared through the ancient rafters as Catherine approached the altar where William waited. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment the weight of ceremony and tradition seemed to fall away, leaving only two people deeply in love, ready to commit their lives to each other. The fairy tale that had captured the world's imagination was becoming reality before the eyes of millions. Prince Charles and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, watched from their seats in the front row, understanding perhaps better than anyone the challenges and joys that lay ahead for the young couple. Charles had waited decades to find lasting love, and seeing his son so clearly happy with his choice of bride brought visible emotion to the future king's face. The Spencer family, representing Diana's side of William's heritage, were present in force, a reminder of the absent mother who had shaped so much of William's character and values. Diana's brothers, Earl Spencer and Lord Fellows, watched with deep emotion, knowing how proud she would have been to see her eldest son marry for love rather than duty. As Catherine finally reached the altar and Michael Middleton stepped forward to formally present his daughter to Prince William, the magnitude of the moment struck everyone present. This was not just a wedding, but a pivotal moment in British history. The commoner who had captured a prince's heart was about to become part of the institution that had ruled Britain for over 1,000 years. The ceremony was about to begin, and with it Catherine Middleton would cease to exist, transformed forever into Catherine, Princess of Wales, future Queen Consort, and one of the most photographed and scrutinized women in the world. But in that perfect moment, as she took William's offered hand and smiled into his eyes, she was simply a woman in love, ready to begin the greatest adventure of her life. Archbishop Rowan Williams stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through Westminster Abbey as he began the ancient ceremony that would unite two hearts and change the course of British history. The words he spoke had been uttered countless times before, but never had they carried quite this weight of expectation and hope for the future of the monarchy. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and in the face of this congregation to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony, the Archbishop began, his Welsh accent adding gravity to each carefully chosen word. William and Catherine stood facing each other, hands joined, their eyes locked in a moment of perfect understanding and shared purpose. The congregation listened in reverent silence as the traditional vows were exchanged. When William spoke his promise to love, comfort, honor, and protect Catherine, his voice was strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the Abbey and into the homes of 2 billion viewers worldwide. Catherine's responses were equally steady, though those closest to her could detect the slight tremor of emotion that made her words even more touching. Queen Elizabeth II watched her grandson with obvious pride, remembering her own wedding day more than 60 years earlier, when she had stood in this very same spot and made similar promises to Prince Philip. The weight of crown and duty had tested their marriage many times, but their love had endured, providing a foundation of stability for the entire royal family through decades of change and challenge. Prince Harry served as best man with obvious joy and barely contained emotion. As William's younger brother and closest confidant, Harry understood better than anyone what this day meant to the future king. He had watched William struggle with the demands of royal duty, seen him search for someone who could love both the man and the prince, and witnessed the transformation that Catherine had brought to his brother's life. When the moment came for the exchange of rings, Prince William placed the simple Welsh gold band on Catherine's finger, with hands that shook slightly with emotion. The ring had been crafted from the same nugget of gold that had provided wedding rings for the Queen Mother, Princess Margaret, and Princess Anne, connecting Catherine to generations of royal women who had worn the crown with grace and dignity. The most magical moment came when Archbishop Williams pronounced them husband and wife. "I now pronounce you man and wife," he declared, and William leaned forward to give Catherine the gentlest of kisses, a moment so tender and natural that it brought tears to eyes throughout the Abbey. The kiss was brief, respectful of the sacred setting, but it spoke volumes about the genuine love between the newlyweds. As the couple turned to face their guests as husband and wife for the first time, the Abbey erupted in joy. The recessional began with Hubert Parry's "I Was Glad," the same anthem that had accompanied the Queen's coronation in 1953. The music soared through the ancient stones as William and Catherine began their walk back down the aisle, this time as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The new Duchess radiated happiness as she walked beside her husband, her train flowing behind her like a river of silk and lace. The young bridesmaids and page boys followed behind, including William's goddaughter Grace Van Cutsum, whose scowl at the noise would later become an internet sensation, and Pippa Middleton, whose elegance in her figure-hugging dress would make her an overnight celebrity in her own right. Outside the Abbey, the waiting crowds had grown even larger during the ceremony. When the great doors opened and the first glimpse of the newly married couple appeared, the cheers were thunderous. Confetti filled the air like snow, and the bells of Westminster began their celebratory peal, joined by church bells across London and throughout Britain. The couple paused at the top of the Abbey steps, waving to the ecstatic crowd below. This was their first public appearance as husband and wife, and the joy on their faces was infectious. William, resplendent in his red Irish Guards uniform, kept his arm protectively around Catherine's waist as they acknowledged the well-wishers who had waited hours to see this moment. The carriage procession back to Buckingham Palace was like something from a fairy tale. The newlyweds rode in the 1902 state landau, an open-topped carriage that allowed the crowds lining the route to see them clearly. Catherine's dress and veil billowed gently in the spring breeze as she waved to the thousands of people who had come to share in their happiness. The route took them past some of London's most iconic landmarks: Parliament Square, where Churchill's statue seemed to salute the passing couple; Whitehall, where government ministers and civil servants hung from office windows to catch a glimpse; and the Mall, where the trees were in full bloom and the crowds were 20 deep on either side of the red-carpeted road. As they approached Buckingham Palace, the couple could see the balcony where they would soon appear, before the crowd gathered in front of the palace gates. The same balcony where the royal family had appeared during the Blitz, where the Queen had waved to crowds celebrating her silver, golden, and diamond jubilees, and where William's parents had shared their first kiss as newlyweds 30 years earlier. The golden gates of Buckingham Palace swung open to welcome the newlyweds home, and as their carriage rolled into the courtyard, Catherine got her first taste of what life behind those famous walls would be like. Palace staff lined the entrance, their faces beaming with genuine happiness as they applauded the new Duchess of Cambridge. Many of them had watched William grow up within these walls, and seeing him so obviously happy brought tears to their eyes. Inside the palace, preparations for the wedding reception were in full swing. The staterooms had been transformed into a wonderland of flowers and elegance, with displays that showcased the very best of British horticulture. The Queen had personally overseen many of the arrangements, understanding that this reception would set the tone for Catherine's integration into the royal family and her acceptance by the British people. The wedding breakfast, as royal tradition dictated the midday reception be called, was an intimate affair for 650 guests. The throne room had been converted into an elegant dining space, with round tables adorned with centerpieces of white roses, Sweet William, and Lily of the Valley. The same flowers from Catherine's bouquet now graced every table, creating a cohesive vision of natural British beauty throughout the grand space. Before joining their guests, William and Catherine took a few precious moments alone in the Queen's private study. Away from the cameras and the crowds, they could finally absorb what had just happened to them. Catherine's hands shook slightly as she tried to process that she was now officially a member of the royal family, while William marveled at how perfectly his new wife had handled every moment of the day's pressures. "You were absolutely perfect," William whispered, taking Catherine's hands in his and looking into her eyes with deep love and admiration. "I couldn't be more proud to call you my wife." Catherine smiled through happy tears, remembering the nervous girl who had stood before her mirror just hours earlier. That girl seemed like a lifetime ago now. The moment was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Queen Elizabeth II entered, her face glowing with maternal warmth and satisfaction. "My dear," she said to Catherine, "welcome to the family. You looked absolutely radiant today." The Queen had brought with her a small velvet box containing a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to Queen Mary, William's great-great-grandmother. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about Catherine's acceptance into the inner circle of the royal family. As the newlyweds made their entrance into the throne room, their guests rose to their feet in thunderous applause. The guest list read like a who's who of British society and international royalty. Crown Prince Frederick and Crown Princess Mary of Denmark raised their glasses in toast, while the Spanish and Swedish royal families looked on with obvious approval of William's choice of bride. The wedding cake was a masterpiece in itself, an 8-tiered creation by Fiona Cairns that stood nearly 3 feet tall. Decorated with cream and white icing and adorned with sugar paste flowers that matched Catherine's bouquet, it was a work of edible art that had taken weeks to perfect. When William and Catherine cut the cake together using William's ceremonial sword, their laughter filled the room and photographers captured images that would grace magazines and newspapers around the world. Prince Philip, now 90 years old but still sharp as ever, regaled nearby tables with stories of his own wedding day and the changes he had witnessed in the monarchy over the decades. His obvious approval of Catherine was clear to everyone present, and his jokes about married life had William laughing, despite his nervousness about the speeches to come. The speeches were heartfelt and genuine, avoiding the stuffiness that might have been expected at such a formal occasion. Michael Middleton spoke movingly about watching his daughter grow from a determined little girl into the poised woman who now sat beside the future king. His words brought tears to many eyes, particularly when he spoke of how proud Catherine's late grandmother would have been to see this day. Prince William's speech was a perfect blend of humor and emotion. He thanked the Middleton family for raising such an extraordinary daughter, praised Catherine for her grace under pressure, and made everyone laugh with gentle teasing about his brother Harry's morning preparations. But the most touching moment came when he spoke directly to his new wife, telling her that she had made him complete and that he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life making her as happy as she had made him. Prince Charles, perhaps mindful of his own complicated path to happiness, spoke briefly but warmly about the importance of love in marriage and the strength that comes from having a true partner in life. His words carried weight because everyone present knew how hard-won his own contentment had been, and his obvious affection for Catherine added another layer of official approval to her position in the family. As the reception continued, Catherine moved gracefully from table to table, speaking with guests and showing the natural warmth and interest in others that would become her trademark in the years to come. She spent time with William's old friends from Eton and St. Andrews, charmed the international royalty with her poise, and made sure to thank personally every member of the clergy who had participated in the ceremony. The atmosphere in the staterooms was one of genuine celebration rather than stuffy formality. Children of various guests played together in corners while their parents mingled, creating a family atmosphere that reflected the couple's desire for their wedding to be a true celebration of love rather than merely a state occasion. As the afternoon sun began to filter through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The time had come for William and Catherine to step onto the famous balcony and greet the thousands of well-wishers who had gathered in the streets below. The crowd outside had grown throughout the day, with people continuing to arrive from across Britain and beyond, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the newlyweds. Palace officials had estimated that nearly 1 million people lined the streets of London that day, the largest crowd to gather for a royal wedding since Charles and Diana 30 years earlier. The atmosphere outside was electric with excitement and genuine affection for the young couple who had captured hearts around the world with their down-to-earth romance and obvious devotion to each other. Catherine stood in the blue drawing room, looking out at the sea of faces below, while palace staff made final adjustments to her dress and veil. The magnitude of what she had taken on was beginning to sink in. These people weren't just well-wishers. They were her people now, part of the nation she would serve alongside William for the rest of her life. The responsibility was overwhelming, but the warmth and love radiating from the crowd below gave her strength. William joined her at the window, slipping his arm around her waist in a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. "Ready for this?" he asked softly, understanding that this public appearance would be Catherine's first real test as a member of the royal family. The balcony appearance wasn't just ceremony, it was a chance for the British people to show their approval and acceptance of their new princess. Queen Elizabeth II gathered the family in the center hall, preparing for the traditional balcony appearance that had become an essential part of major royal occasions. She looked at Catherine with obvious pride and affection, remembering her own nervousness when she had first appeared on this same balcony as a young princess. The Queen had weathered decades of public scrutiny and personal challenges, and she saw in Catherine the same quiet strength and determination that would serve the monarchy. Well, in the years ahead, the family procession onto the balcony was carefully orchestrated but felt wonderfully natural. The Queen led the way, followed by Prince Philip, Prince Charles, and Camilla, and then the stars of the day, William and Catherine. Behind them came Prince Harry, the Middleton family, and other senior royals, creating a tableau that represented both tradition and the changing face of the modern monarchy. When the balcony doors opened and the royal family stepped into view, the roar from the crowd below was deafening. Cheers, applause, and shouts of congratulation echoed off the buildings surrounding the palace, creating a wall of sound that seemed to lift the newlyweds off their feet. Catherine's face lit up with genuine surprise and delight at the enthusiasm of the reception. The crowd began chanting, "Kiss! Kiss, kiss!" almost immediately, a tradition that had started with Charles and Diana's wedding and had become an expected part of royal balcony appearances. William looked at Catherine with a mixture of amusement and affection, while she blushed but smiled encouragingly. The spontaneous demand from the crowd below showed just how much the British people had embraced their new princess. William leaned in for their first public kiss as husband and wife, a brief but tender moment that sent the crowd into absolute raptures. Photographers captured the image that would appear on front pages around the world, but more importantly, the kiss showed the genuine love between the couple that had made their fairy tale romance so compelling to millions of people. But the crowd wasn't satisfied with just one kiss. The chanting continued, and after exchanging amused glances, William and Catherine obliged with a second kiss that was even more enthusiastic than the first. The spontaneous moment of joy and affection perfectly captured the happiness of the day and showed that despite all the protocol and ceremony, this was fundamentally a celebration of love. The Red Arrows, Britain's elite aerobatic display team, chose that perfect moment to roar overhead in formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky. The timing was flawless, creating a spectacular backdrop for the balcony scene that no amount of planning could have improved upon. The crowd gasped and cheered at the magnificent display, while Catherine looked up in wonder at the jet streaming past. Prince Harry, standing behind his brother and new sister-in-law, was clearly enjoying every moment of the spectacle. His broad grin and obvious happiness for the couple was infectious, and his relaxed demeanor helped put Catherine at ease during what could have been an overwhelming experience. The bond between the brothers was evident to everyone watching, and Harry's support meant everything to William on this momentous day. As the family waved to the crowd below, Catherine began to relax and truly enjoy the moment. The initial nervousness gave way to genuine warmth as she saw families with young children waving flags, elderly couples who had waited hours for this moment, and people from all walks of life united in celebration of love and hope for the future. The balcony appearance lasted nearly 10 minutes, giving the crowd ample opportunity to show their appreciation and allowing photographers to capture hundreds of images that would document this historic day. But perhaps the most memorable moment came when a small child in the crowd below threw a bouquet of flowers toward the balcony. Though it fell far short of reaching its target, the gesture touched Catherine's heart and reminded everyone present that this was a celebration shared by the entire nation. As the sun began to set over London, casting a golden glow across the palace gardens, William and Catherine finally found themselves with a few precious moments of privacy. The official duties of the day were complete, the last photographs had been taken, and the final guests had departed. Now in the quiet of the Queen's private garden, the newlyweds could finally reflect on the extraordinary day that had changed their lives forever. Catherine had changed from her elaborate wedding gown into a stunning evening dress designed by Sarah Burton, a flowing creation in ivory satin that was both elegant and comfortable for the evening celebration ahead. The transformation from bride to duchess seemed complete, but William could still see traces of the nervous excitement in her eyes that had been there that morning when they had stood at the altar of Westminster Abbey. The evening reception was a more intimate affair, limited to 300 of their closest family and friends. The state dining room had been transformed into a magical space filled with candles and fairy lights, creating an atmosphere that was both romantic and celebratory. This was their chance to relax and truly enjoy their wedding day with the people who mattered most to them. Prince Charles had personally overseen many of the evening's arrangements, wanting to ensure that his son and new daughter-in-law had memories they would treasure forever. The menu featured many of William and Catherine's favorite foods, including a selection of organic produce from the Prince of Wales's gardens at Highgrove. It was Charles's way of welcoming Catherine into the family while honoring the couple's preferences and personalities. The most touching moment of the evening came when Prince William took the microphone to address their guests one final time. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke about the journey that had brought him and Catherine to this moment. From their first meeting at St. Andrews University to the proposal in Kenya that had sealed their fate, he thanked Catherine for her patience during their long courtship, her grace under pressure, and her willingness to take on the challenges that came with loving a future king. Catherine's response was equally heartfelt, though she chose to speak without a microphone, addressing their guests in a more intimate tone that reflected her naturally modest personality. She thanked the royal family for accepting her so warmly, expressed her gratitude to her own family for their unwavering support, and promised to serve the British people with dedication and humility in the years ahead. The first dance as husband and wife took place in the ballroom, where a small orchestra played Your Song by Elton John, a choice that honored both William's love for his mother's favorite performer and the couple's desire for music that reflected their generation. As they swayed together in the center of the dance floor, surrounded by their loved ones, the formality of the day finally melted away, leaving only two people deeply in love. Prince Harry's best man speech was the highlight of the evening's entertainment, a perfect blend of humor and genuine affection that had everyone in tears of laughter one moment and reaching for tissues the next. He shared stories of their childhood adventures, William's various romantic disasters before meeting Catherine, and his brother's transformation from reluctant prince to devoted husband. The speech showed the deep bond between the brothers and Harry's obvious joy at seeing William so happy. As the evening progressed, the formal atmosphere gave way to genuine celebration. The Queen herself was seen laughing heartily at Prince Philip's jokes, while the Middleton family mingled easily with European royalty and British aristocracy. Catherine's natural warmth and genuine interest in others had won over even the most skeptical observers, and it was clear that she would bring a fresh perspective to the royal family. The dancing continued well into the night, with William proving that his years of royal training had not dampened his ability to enjoy himself. He and Catherine were clearly having the time of their lives, dancing with their siblings, their parents, and eventually with each other again as the evening wound down. When the time finally came to leave for their honeymoon, the couple made their way through the palace corridors that would become Catherine's home for the rest of her life. The same walls that had witnessed centuries of British history would now witness her own transformation from middle-class girl to future queen consort. The honeymoon destination was kept secret, but as their car pulled away from Buckingham Palace in the early hours of the morning, William and Catherine knew they were beginning not just a romantic getaway, but a lifetime of service, duty, and love that would define the future of the British monarchy. The fairy tale wedding was over, but the real story was just beginning. Catherine Middleton had become Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, and in doing so, had shown the world that love could still triumph in an age of cynicism, that tradition could embrace change, and that sometimes, just sometimes, ordinary people really could live happily ever after. The young woman who had walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey that morning had not just married a prince. She had captured the hearts of a nation and given the monarchy a new chapter filled with hope, love, and the promise of a bright future ahead. Their wedding day would be remembered as one of the most beautiful and joyful in royal history. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of a partnership that would help guide Britain through the challenges and triumphs of the 21st century, proving that the greatest royal entrance of all was not the one that led to the altar, but the one that led to a lifetime of love and service together.